Welcome to another edition of the Eye on Life podcast. I am your host, Brian Boyer, and a little bit more of a business theme today. So I always say, people always make fun of me, Rebecca. They say, you always say it's go time. That's like, that's like the thing. And I'm not a cliche kind of person, but today's actually business time. We're going to get into some business today. We're going to talk a little bit about business. We're going to talk a little bit about life outside of the office as well. And I want to welcome a very special guest, first timer on the show, Rebecca Corbin. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us on the Eye on Life podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brian. Hi, everyone.
So Rebecca is the founder and CEO of Corbin Advisors. And you were one of those people that took the step to start your own business, which is very commendable. I've recently started to do the same thing. So I see all the growing pains and the success and the challenges and all that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Before we get started, though, a couple of things. I want to recognize a few new listeners that we have. We have a few new listeners in Phoenix, Arizona. So I want to shout out to the desert. Thanks so much for downloading. We keep track of our stats. We don't care where you're listening as long as you're listening, but we like to. It is nice to know where people are from. So Phoenix, Arizona, and I need to give a shout out also to Waterbury, Connecticut. You're a Connecticut person, so we have some new downloads also from Waterbury.
Nutmeggers unite.
Exactly. If we don't have the nutmeggers, I expect other people throughout the country or the world to listen. So thank you for the support, and we're thrilled to have Rebecca. So Rebecca, I need to ask you a question because
hopefully you're going to ask me a lot of questions. Otherwise, it's going to be a weird interview.
I don't necessarily know. Well, you're more than welcome to deviate and ask me some questions. Most of the guests don't take advantage of that.
Maybe I will.
I've only had a couple of people that have kind of turned the table on me, but I challenge you to do that if you feel so inclined.
Thank you.
Maybe so we'll see where it goes. And actually, before I ask you this question, I just also want to recognize our show sponsor, Must NY. They wear the mask, COVID masks. Some people tell me they don't use to say COVID masks, but there are people that are just wearing masks around. That might just be for random purposes. So I like to specify COVID. MustNY.com show sponsor, my friend Chris Bossert, his wife Monica Perez Bossert. They're entrepreneurs based out in Western New York. They're very comfortable masks. They're actually very trendy. They're very in. So even after I've said this before, some people you might want to muffle somebody, you don't want to hear. So it's a great gift if there's somebody that you don't necessarily want to hear that much. Get on the mask. They're fantastic.
Kid sizes? Are we talking kid sizes?
Especially kid sizes, right? We know especially kids. These should go on kids all year. But the nice thing is they're very breathable, so you're not really harming your children.
Yes.
I want to ask you this question because there are people in the business world and in society. It's like almost like two types of people. There's morning people and night people. So the people that love to get up in the morning, they're up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, they're exercising. Those are the people that, they're highly caffeinated. And for those who are night people, those people can be very annoying in the morning, right? They can be very chipper and the sun is out and, I'm happy to start my day, right? So there's that group of people.
Yes.
Then there are the night people who love to be up late. They're watching movies, they're watching sports, they're doing work, they're surfing the internet. And they stay up till all hours of the night. I do believe that we can get into a society here where we all collectively come together as one. But let me ask you this question. Which category do you fall into? Are you morning or are you an evening person? Where do you sort of perform, or where is your mind more maybe a little sharper?
Morning. I'm a night owl. I do my best work at, from 11 to 2 a.m. Okay. I try not to do that anymore. Used to do that in my 20s, but I definitely am a night owl that is forcing myself to become a morning person.
So let's just say this. So if you're up until 2 a.m., for example, what time you get? I mean, you're not getting up at 5, I would hope. I mean, that's
I'm not.
Some days.
I enjoy sleeping in. Obviously our workday starts at 8 and, generally I try to get up at 6:30. With a lot of snoozes, up by 7. If I pull one of those nights, and that's generally we've got a big client deliverable, I'm trying to help my team get something out the door, then I'm sleeping in, and I encourage my team to do that as well.
Well, we are going to talk about work-life balance.
Yes.
I was just reading an article recently. In quotes, work-life balance. But I know it's good for morale. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I know you are big on you're big on the work life. I was just reading an article. I don't remember which publication it was in, but I think it was Goldman Sachs, and some of the junior people were working, 20-hour days. And I think that because they were working 20-hour days, they got them, I think, fruit baskets, which I guess maybe some strawberries and apples and oranges.
Give them some sugar, they'll perform even more.
And it's natural sugar, right? So I guess maybe I don't know if that was for morale or if that was to make sure they're working 22-hour days versus 20-hour days. But so you're a night owl, and let me ask you the question, because I know that you work long, hard hours, but I do know balance is important to you.
Yes.
You started your own business. Talk a little bit about how you got there. A little bit about your background, and I know you're in Connecticut. You're based in Connecticut right now. Your company's here. You do a lot in the community.
Love Connecticut. I'm a pro nutmegger. Live in this state. We gotta cheer for our state.
Well, it's a small state, but it's a mighty state with a loud voice.
Yes.
So as the founder and CEO of a very successful company now, right? How did you get there? What was kind of your, the abridged version? I'm sure there could probably be a documentary on your life, right? Probably, but just sort of the abridged version of kind of how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, sure. It actually dates back to college, if you can believe it. And I actually thought that I was very, very strong student in English and social and those types of sciences. And math was not my forte. I was forced to take a math course in my sophomore year, a statistics course, and I got an A. That completely changed my life. I was going in for creative writing in English. I switched my major to business, and I graduated, and I started at a firm that serviced publicly traded companies. And I was so out of my element at this company called Thomson Financial that I wanted to quit my first 3 months of working there. Never worked in finance, really new to me, but I grounded out. And through this time, I started a business around 23 years old for this company around stakeholder perception and engagement. And it was something that I had identified as an area of opportunity. And, they gave me the opportunity to actually build out this organization. And over the past, over 4 years, I turned it into a multi-million-dollar business, second strongest organic grower. And, but at some point, the hours I dedicated my life to this business, and it just became a little bit too much for me. That I really kind of came to a fork in the road, and I decided, this has been great foundation, but I really want to move to something else. And I started looking at consulting firms, and I had some advisors that I was speaking with, and they actually convinced me to start my own company doing a very similar entity. I had a non-compete. I let that expire. Best time of my life, garden leave for 9 months, didn't have to work. But I started Corbin in 2007, probably the worst time you could ever start a perception company, right ahead of the Great Recession. And it taught me a lot. I did a lot of free work around what investors were thinking. I created a newsletter that actually led to business. I always say, I just have a passion. I have a passion for my business. I'm very interested and curious. I love data and analysis and asking people questions and then listening to the responses and aggregating that so that there's data and decisions can be made. And so I've combined my creative writing, which was where I went, originally into school, with this, quantitative analysis mindset that I really never knew I had, and created Corbin Advisors. And so we work with publicly traded companies ranging from 250 million to 360 billion in market cap across every sector. Our clientele are CEOs and CFOs and IROs, as well as board of directors. And we help them communicate more effectively with the financial community around strategy, valuation, environmental, social, and governance elements. And, our track record is actually successfully re-rating companies, meaning that the work that we do allows companies to sustainably drive their share price higher, which quite frankly rewards all stakeholders. If their employees are owners of the stock, that rewards them, it rewards shareholders, et cetera.
I don't even know where to go from there. That was a huge, and that was a great elevator pitch.
I hope that was truncated enough.
It certainly was. And I do have to ask you a question, because when people, when people come on the show and they give me answers, there are certain things that I sort of pick out. And there's one thing that there are several things that stood out there. But why is it that whenever anybody has a horror story about academics, it always involves statistics? I'm not saying yours was a horror story.
I got an A in it.
You got an A in it. And but it's always interesting, because whenever, you talk to a marketing person, communications person, anybody who's not doing statistics for, in that for a living, right? They always talk about their statistics class. it's usually not the story that you told me today. It's usually, well, I was barely able to pass that class, but I don't know what it is about statistics. It's actually a very fascinating class. If you can actually,
It is a fantastic. Love statistics.
And are you? So if anybody's listening to the show, are you tutoring anybody since you did get an A? Are you tutoring in that, or is that not your thing?
No, I don't trust myself to tutor, but.
But you talked a lot about the utilization of data, and you talked about working with CEOs and leaders within companies and other organizations, right? And every CEO that I've ever worked with, every leader within an organization, CEO, executive director, president, whatever their title is, they're always very data driven. They don't want the anecdotal. I mean, they want the story, but within the story, they want the numbers, right? Because that's what they have to show their shareholders, their boards of directors, all of that. So another thing that I've noticed about leaders, right, like yourself, is you don't want to hear about problems. You want to hear about solutions. Or let me change that. You want to hear about the problems very minimally. You don't want to dwell on that. You then want to get into the solution to whatever that issue or challenge might be. Do you have any special techniques? Because it doesn't matter how long, you could be working as an entry-level marketing person for a week, or you could be working in accounting for 30 years. Everyone has encountered some kind of challenge, some kind of difficulty that potentially could make or break them, their company, their work, whatever. Do you have any specific techniques that you can share with our audience, best practices, as far as solving problems?
Sure.
And I don't just mean solving the problem itself. I'm saying the mental part of it too, as far as when the panic sets in.
It's a great question, Brian. And actually, we're at my own company. We're going through that right now. Our challenge that we had an offsite yesterday, and we had a cultural breakout where we broke our firm into 3 groups, and we talked about the positives and negatives of our culture. We have a very strong culture. We have a very dedicated and loyal employee base. We work as one team, and the challenge is workload. And, because we are a hyper growth company, we have a CAGR of 40% for the 13 years that I've been running this company. We're significantly higher this year. So people are working very intensely, and it's COVID. So there's really no end and no beginning. People get up, and we're kind of hybrid with regard to people in the office, people not in the office. So a lot of our employees aren't getting a break of even getting in the car to and from the office. And it's becoming a real challenge. So, a lot of the feedback that we heard in terms of the constructive was, the workload, the intensity. So I'm problem solving right now. My technique, quite frankly, I'm a glass half full kind of girl. I just always think positively. That's just the way I'm wired. And, when you have a chat, and it's okay to talk about problems, actually. I know we want to turn it into solution oriented, but sometimes we have to talk about problems because clearly and concisely identifying the problem actually allows us to develop the solution. And I think that's what it is, identify what the issue is, what the problem is, what the challenge is. And my techniques are actually creating space where I can think about it. I do a lot of strategy work at my firm. In my experience, you have to separate yourself from the day-to-day to be able to really crystallize strategy, put it down on paper, think about it, because we're just moving so quickly. So I spent a lot of time kind of what are we trying to solve for? And then sitting down and developing an outline and a strategy around what we're trying to solve for, big and small.
Well, you raise a really good point there too, because you talk about, you have to have problems or challenges, right? If you don't, it's like we all know this couple, right? That says, we never fight. We always get along. And there's usually a problem there. I'm sorry. There just is. I don't mean to sound judgmental, but it's the same thing, right? In your business, you're going to have problems, and it's probably a way to enrich your organization to not necessarily have all the problems and none of the solutions, but to be able to work through that.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you this also. One of the things I've always felt is very, very important in the workplace, as far as when it comes to developing your employees and your team, is discomfort. Taking people out of their comfort zone, right? Where it's very, very easy to always do what we know how to do, and to be content, right? But but do you really grow that way? People, it's a buzzword, but disruptors, right? They're organizational disruptors, they're technological disruptors. How important do you feel, because you mentioned problems, I didn't like the word problems, we'll say challenges.
Sure.
But when it comes to the disruptions in the workplace and the discomfort, how important is that discomfort for someone to grow and succeed and become an even stronger cog in that operation? I think that's huge.
It is huge. It's interesting. I think the workplace is changing. And, there's an old guard and a new guard. I'm part of the old guard, which is essentially work until it hurts. Like I'm going to, pull all-nighters. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to charge hard. I have several of those types of employees at my company where we're just, excuse me, hardcore. There are others, and I think some of the newer generation, and I don't want to cast because I have some young people who are exactly that, but they're starting to become more of a hybrid. And I think just in terms of what's happening in the workplace and the focus around social and trying to have a more fulfilling work-life balance, et cetera, is changing how we as leaders and entrepreneurs are engaging our employees. So I would say Corbin lives in a state of discomfort perennially, because as a growth business, you're forced to be very agile. You're forced to shift gears 100 times a day. You're working on very intense projects and workloads, and so you're constant in that. And I would say that what we're trying to do is really make it as not as uncomfortable as possible, because we want to have the positive of growing, of challenging our employees. And a lot of times that's okay, now you're going to lead a call. So you've sat on many calls with CEOs. Now you're going to lead the call. So they have to plan, they have to prepare. We have a process around that. We have a lot of SOPs at our company. We're trying to be operationally excellent. And then a lot of feedback, and we have a feedback culture. And so there is a level of, sink or swim. But then there's a comfort of, we're going to help you do that. We're going to teach you what to do, how to do it. And then we're going to give you feedback, both positive and negative. And I think that's it plays the part of helping people grow and stretch, but we do it in a nice way of, we can hold your hand.
And I think there is a difference also between, and I'll ask you this question, people always say, constructive criticism or negative feedback, right? And I look at it as, I like to use the word constructive feedback, just because everybody, listen, we all know what it is. It all means the same thing.
I use that too.
So we try to do that versus the negative connotations to helping somebody grow. Every challenge, every area of improvement is also an area of opportunity as well, I think. Yes. And I think that's also important. We're going to talk about your culture in just a second. Before we get there, I have a very important question for you. Did you ever see the movie Office Space?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad, because I didn't want to have to explain that. If you haven't seen, I'm not going to get into the whole premise of the story. Movie Office Space, it's great. It's like the typical, sterile corporate work environment. Michael Bolton and all that. It's not the real Michael Bolton, it's another Michael Bolton. Anyway, great movie. Every time I watch it cracks me up, because we have all worked with the characters who are in that movie. If you've ever worked in the corporate environment or an office environment, you've worked with that person several times, right? So my question to you is, how do you avoid, you talk about all this work that you have within the organization, right? And there's a lot of overflow work. You can't get it all done in one day. How do you avoid at Corbin Advisors, how do you avoid doing things? And I'm going to give an example, meetings, for example. How do you avoid things that are, in some organizations, are done just for the sake of having them, just for the sake of being done, but they don't really serve a purpose? I think in that movie, you remember I think it was TPC reports, remember that? Yeah. These mundane things that on the computer that had nothing to do with anything that they were really doing, but they had to be done. How do you kind of trim the fat and make sure that when you have an hour meeting, right, that it's an hour of productivity versus an hour that people are losing in their day?
Yeah. I think it goes back to my last comment around operational excellence. And we are very thoughtful around our time. A lot of our time actually is spent on client calls. So we are Zooming with different clients across the day, but we do have productive meetings with each other. I've set it up where we have 2 major meetings a week where we are coming together as teams, and we're going through everything that we need to do. So I don't have to spend, 2 or 3 emails relaying something to this person or that person. Everybody is on the call. We all hear what's happening. We all understand who's responsible, and then we break and we go do it. For us, it's actually not the meetings and calls. For us, it is the workflow, and it's working, late hours, not feeling like you can check out because somebody sent you an email, at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and you feel compelled to respond, or even working on the weekends. And I'll tell you, this is something that I am so passionate about, trying to figure out a way to really mitigate what's happening. I think not just at Corbin, I mean, across, the world, this is what is happening. And so we're trying to put in some quick hits. I'm actually going to announce tomorrow, as a follow-up to our strategy offsite, guidelines around emailing team members. So, if it is not urgent, okay, don't email after 6 o'clock. Put it in your drafts box, and you can start emailing people at 7:30, which is a half an hour before we start our day, so people can at least get prepared. You can have an urgent message in there. So if it's urgent, okay. And really trying to not email during the weekends. I don't email during the weekends. I try to really limit that and not request things of my team, but I'm not sure that I've made that collectively known across the organization. And so we're, it's just little things like that to try to start to train. And, one thing is that I'm thinking about is potentially working with our clients and actually communicating what's happening, because we are working really hard. Our clients, are very appreciative of what we're doing. But if their deadline, isn't until X, we don't have to have an unnatural deadline where we're forcing everything to get done before it even is being reviewed by our clients. So, we're always trying to find ways to optimize where we are. We use a program called Asana as well. Asana is a workflow, and that has helped tremendously in terms of just keeping everybody online, working more efficiently, less emailing. So everybody knows what they need to do, when they need to do it, who's responsible for it.
We could do a whole show on email etiquette.
Yes.
That's a 45-minute show right there. We'll have you back. We'll talk about email etiquette another time. I don't want to get too much into that today. But I feel like, and it's so funny too, because we talked about statistics, right? And there are all these classes, and there might be one now, I don't know, but there should be a class on email etiquette. I guarantee it would save people their jobs in certain situations.
Yeah, you got to always go back and have a salutation. That's one of my things. Hello, how's it going? Use a couple exclamation points before you kind of launch in.
How's your day? That kind of thing. I know, because what happens is when you don't do that, people find that he's being demanding. He's not even asking me how I'm doing. And not everyone's thinking like that. Not everyone's thinking about it. They're in their mindset.
They're not even thinking. They're just,
They're just typing. and tones and what you do put in email versus what you don't put in email. And
yes.
And one of my biggest things is the reply all button. My God, that thing is absolutely evil.
Actually, one more point on that, not to reply all, but one of the kind of triage that we just did was we had a lot of people on calls that really weren't participating in the call. They were on the team, but they weren't an active participant. And we essentially cut out everybody who wasn't an active participant, because if they're on the call, they're either multitasking. So their time is split between trying to listen and do, or not listening and doing, right? Or not doing and listening. So we put a kibosh to that and freed up, probably 30% of our team's time to actually do more work.
I want to ask you a very important question. I'd love to get your perspective on this. And you actually gave me a really great segue there, because you talked about some of the things that you might be trying to do. Small decisions that make a big difference, like no emails after 6 o'clock, or I've always thought, on in the middle of July on a Friday, okay, it's 3:30, go, leave or whatever. I'm not suggesting you do that if you don't.
No, we have that philosophy.
Little things that make a huge difference.
Work from home on Fridays. We had that. Now we're working from home every day, but
it's really not costing you. At the end of the day, it's really not costing you. You're really gaining by doing that. But let me ask you this question, and before I get into the culture and people, if somebody in your organization, and I'm not specifically talking about Corbin, I'm just saying in general, if somebody within the organization fails at their job, they just, for whatever, again, some are more life-threatening and others are not, right? But whatever, they failed at their job and they're just not doing a good job. Is that their fault, or is it the leadership's fault? Because I don't know if you're a sports fan. Are you a sports fan?
I am a sports fan.
Okay, so who's your favorite football team? Who do you have a?
Well, it was the Patriots.
Tom Brady left.
Now it's the Buccaneers.
Now there you go. So I think we know where your allegiances lie. What happens is that, and you look at even, and obviously, with the CEO role, right? The CEO gets the credit when things are good, but they take the bad too, right? When if a very low level person does something, it's still technically the CEO's fault. They may have never met that person. coaches, head coaches in football, they get fired all the time because their players aren't executing it. The buck stops with them, right? But in your opinion, if somebody in your organization fails miserably, is it on them or is it on you?
It's on me. It's on our system. Yeah. I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and actually I was just having a conversation this week about this very thing. I talk a lot about playing to strengths. Hopefully we have a system in place, and I believe we do have a system in place that is very good around funneling the right type of person or a person that's aligned to our culture, because we have a very clear personality around our culture. And we, try to, in the process of hiring, find those types of people, and then we have to train them. And, if they're not, where do they belong? What are their strengths? What are they not good at? What do we need to fill gaps on? What do we need to professionally train or develop them on? That's all the leadership. And, you can take folks and inspire them and help them. At some point, it is the accountability of the person. And if you've given them every single tool and resource to, be successful, but, they're not executing, or there isn't a passion, or they're, just not committed or dedicated, then obviously there's a different story. But I do believe that it is the responsibility of leadership.
How important is, and I want to get into culture now a little bit, how important is fit? Because I worked for, there was an organization that I worked for a while back. And I remember when I started and somebody told me that pretty much everyone within the organization is a type A personality. And it was sort of framed to me as a positive. I'm not necessarily saying it's a negative.
Yeah. Well, you want to have diversity.
Well, right. But you have to have diversity, and I don't mean just diversity of people and backgrounds, right? I'm talking about diversity in, people's personalities.
Yeah, exactly.
And, people do have to complement one another in a team environment. You can't have all the same kind of person. If you have all type A personalities, who knows where that ship's going, right? If you have all, people that are lethargic and not doing what they need to do, then that ship just sinks, right? So how important is when you're looking to attract talented people? Because there's a difference. I always find that there's a big distinction between talented people and people that are the right fit. And I've always been of the mindset that sometimes if maybe somebody might not be, quite as qualified, but they're a better fit, that person might sometimes be the better hire. Again, it depends on the role in the organization. But for you, how important is somebody to fit within the culture of your organization?
Very important. It's very important because we have a very specific culture. And so we are very upfront in interviews around, who we are, what to expect, and really because if you, we are a team of outperformers, and there's a whole level of outperformance at our company, just like rock star, all day long, consistent execution. Then we've got folks who they work on like the hairy situations. So they're kind of like this, and then, they're going up, and then they're like this. So, we expect it when we need it, but they're not rocking it all day long at the same level as others. And then there are others who are just really hardworking, dedicated. They don't really have aspirations necessarily to, move up the corporate ladder, et cetera. But if you don't fit within that organization, I mean, if you're not an outperformer and somebody who's passionate and cares and wants to be the best and strives for excellence in everything that they do, which is our culture, it's going to be very difficult to survive in that. And we want to try to avoid that, right? Because we're a very positive, engaging, embracing, inspiring culture. We strive to be, and we don't want to have somebody have a bad experience. And, so you have to be, it's kind of like dating, right? You have to know what you want as a person who's looking for a job. And the employer has to know what they want so that there can be connectivity, because, it costs a lot of time, it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of heartache when you're wrong.
I'm still, the reason why I'm pausing is I'm still thinking about the dating and it's like speed dating, right? Sometimes you don't have that long sometimes to make an impression.
Yeah, it's true. It's like 2 or 3 interviews and you're like, years.
And then why didn't they choose me? What did I do wrong? What did I say? But it is interesting. And
we always let them know why, by the way. We have a close the loop process where
that's great.
We never let anybody hanging. We always tell them thank you. And, we've gone in another direction, but.
No, I think most people can handle that. I think most people respect the honesty and the transparency versus just never hearing. I think that's bad. I think it's bad form. I'm sorry. I know there are organizations that that don't always let people know. But you look at how would you feel if you're the one, if you apply for this job that you really wanted, and then and not only just closure, right?
Yeah, totally.
Going back to the dating thing, it's like you get ghosted. You go to the restaurant, you get ghosted. Just text me and call me and say, I saw your picture. I'm not interested.
Right.
That's much better. So as far as how you attract, how you attract talent, because obviously the, those who represent your brand are an extension of you. So you have to, so you're hiring, we talked about fit, right? But you're hiring people who you trust. You're hiring people who you feel are talented, who are credible, who you can maybe, send out to a meeting and not necessarily always have to be there, and know that, that client's not going to call you the next day and say, we're done because this person, God knows what they did, right?
Yeah.
So
we do a lot of training.
Yeah, a lot of training, right? So maybe that's your answer. So, how do you attract talent? How do you, retain talent? Because, you talked about, again, the emails and the culture.
Yeah.
There are some organizations that will go, they'll have sleep pods, right? Where you take a nap during the day. They'll have, some of these high tech companies on, Google and everything. They have these carnivals and tennis courts and all this. Great. That's all wonderful. But what are some of the more realistic things that you attract talent?
Yeah.
And then also not have to, retrain somebody when this person leaves 6 months later because it didn't work out. How do you kind of manage that?
So we have a very clear process around our talent. We have a very specific grid that we're looking for that makes it easy for reviewers to interviewers to kind of assess talent real time. And we use quantitative analysis to, kind of add it all together. We also have very specific questions that each one of us uses. So we've developed a system that through 3-4 interviews, you're getting different angles and perspectives that we feel like we're covering the bases. But we're really looking for, probably more of the soft skills, energetic, hardworking, disciplined, passionate, because we're going to teach a lot of the hard skills. I mean, there's really, when you come to our firm, it's very rare. You could have 20, 30 years in the industry, and, we're teaching you things that are brand new in terms of how we do it and what we do. So it's very rare to kind of pluck somebody out of, the universe and put them in Corbin and have them, hitting the ground. It's about a 6 to 9 month ramp up to where they're actually, released into the firm and really, helping to generate revenue and absorb revenue. So that's kind of our process. In terms of retaining, I think it's just, passionate leadership. I'm very passionate about my team. I'm very hard driving. I work hard too, but I try to always think about all of the different perspectives. I have a family. I have 4 daughters, wonderful husband who we love to spend time together, et cetera. So, as a woman, and men too, but, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a boss to, almost 40 people, et cetera. So, a lot of time gets taken out. I think for retaining, I try to create a culture that is fun, rewarding, where we celebrate our wins, and we have an open feedback so people feel like we're all in this together. I often talk about being in the trenches together. So that's more of my leadership, and I think people have bought into my vision. We have very low turnover. We really doubled down and actually had 104% growth in our talent over 2020. And we do virtual happy hours. We try to have activities throughout the year. It's been a little bit challenging, obviously, with COVID, but and I try to stay in touch with all of my employees. I try to check in with them to see kind of take the pulse, how you doing, how you feeling. Because, it can get very, we're grinding. So you can, you got to keep pulse of what people are doing. And reviews are very important. We're on an annual review, but we have, reviews all the time, if you will. So you're never surprised. And I think compensating employees, in different ways. We have really great healthcare. We have a good comp package to great comp package. And, as we grow and get more successful, we bring that back to our employees.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're really that kind of thing really is, obviously it's all overhead, but it's an investment really too. It's an investment in your people. Yes. And I think good talented people will see that, respect that, and want to work for an organization that takes care of them. They'll take care of the organization.
That was my number one learning lesson, actually. Over my 13 years, I finally got to a state where I realized that I had to invest in talent. And, I really needed to find folks who, would buy into the vision, but that, you just have to invest in your people. Because, the better your people are, right, the better you're going to be.
You would think that would be business 101, right?
I know.
But
the expense is overwhelming.
There are a lot of things that are business 101 that people don't even think about. So it's sometimes stating the obvious is very important. And that's a key thing, obviously, is investing in your talent. I think that's perfectly said. That's a great kind of tagline, right? Investing in your talent. Let me ask you this question, because you talked about soft skills. And, we said earlier, right? There's no, that I'm aware of, there might be at this point, but there's no class on email etiquette. There's no class on, I think there are interpersonal communications classes. I took one in college too, but there, you can't go take a class on energy. Right. I don't mean energy like fossil fuels. I mean energy like caffeine, right?
Yeah.
There are just certain traits that you either have or you don't have. You can't necessarily learn them in the classroom. So let me ask you this question. Can some of those soft skills, though, even though they're not necessarily classes, right, pertaining to them, can they be learned based on the culture within the organization? So there are some cultures, obviously, that are very vibrant. There's some that are a little more stuffy is not the word, but, a little more laid back, maybe.
Mature.
Exactly. But do you think that, let's say somebody has all the raw skills, they have all the technical skills, they can come in and they can do the job. But maybe they could lose a little bit more, there's somebody, Seinfeld, right? The low talker. A little more energy would be nice, right? I need energy from you. Come on, work with me here. Clearly, you and I don't have that problem. I can tell just by our.
Believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I truly am an introvert.
You're an introvert. So, all right.
I play an extrovert in my day job.
Okay, so that's interesting. So, well, that leads me to another question. I'm going to digress in a second. Can you be the same at home as you are in the office, or does that switch go on and off? I want to ask you that question too, but before we get there, but can people learn some of those soft skills, or is it kind of like their personality is kind of what they are?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that you could become anything that you want to be, with the dedication and the interest in doing that, and with guidance. And so I do think soft skills can be taught. Soft skills are, energize, you can give that feedback. We go through a lot of that type of training with our own employees. We have a lot of, quiet, kind of introspective, and it's just that constant encouragement, speak up, now you're going to have this opportunity to lead a call, giving them the blueprint to get them confident. I think a lot of it is confidence too. To kind of, be whatever they, come out of their shell or, be energized and have that. But I do think you can teach soft skills. I mean, you're not going to be able to change someone unless they want to really embrace that, but you can certainly give them the tools and the resources to leverage. I don't want to say fake it, but,
right.
To kind of do what they need to do to be successful.
And that goes back to the point that we were saying before, that it's okay to maybe be an introvert. Not everybody has to be that type A bulldog, right? You don't always have to be that. So I want to ask you this question, because I've done a lot of work in my career with lawyers. And one of the things that a lot of the conversations that I've had with lawyers is that they can't quite turn off the switch when they go home. They're in argue mode, legal mode, and they go home and they're arguing with their kids. Their kids are looking at what the heck is he or she talking about. They're talking to their significant other. All of this, right? Let me ask you, Rebecca, do you have a switch? You just said you are. I think you said extrovert by day, introvert by night. I think that's what you said. But and I want anybody who's listening to the show or watching the show, I don't mean a literal switch. I have to be very careful. Not a literal switch, but do you sort of feel like you are, when you go home and you're with your family, you're out to dinner, you're going to see a concert or whatever, you're a different person then than you are when you're, obviously having that client conversation, talking to an employee about an evaluation. I know that sounds like an obvious question. Like, well, of course I'm different. I'm not talking to my kids like I'm talking to an employee. But you know what I mean. Are you the same person, or are you kind of switching?
I am the same person. Okay. I always tell my people, what you see is what you get with me. I'm very, because I believe in that type of leadership. I believe in being real. I believe in authenticity of your employees seeing, you as a person, because we're all humans, right? I mean, like, So we have an emotional element to our culture where, we're, to some level, you're allowed to get upset. To some level, I've seen people cry, and we've worked it out, right? Just in terms of stress loads or whatever. And like, I've been there, and I really try to be the same person and show my employees what I'm going through. I've said many times during COVID, like, it's mentally straining. I don't know how it's impacting people in different ways. And I'm very open about that. I've had some very sad situations with deaths of very close friends this year. I share that with my team because they need to know that type of stuff, because that impacts our who we are, what we do, and how we're acting, et cetera. And I think through actually sharing that level of kind of inner self, I hope that, I'm not an employer, Brian, right? I really try to be an inspiration to, my employees. I mean, I'm so proud to be able to, create opportunities, but, I'm also trying to impact people and, have an impact in our community and society, et cetera. So that's my leadership. And like, my kids will tell you, they know what a PowerPoint is. They talk in business terms because I'm very proud of the work that we do. And, I fill them in on my day at the dinner table. So I am a little bit colored by being a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, and owner of Corbin Advisors. It does influence my entire life. So, but I don't, in terms of the switch, Friday nights, man, I'm like out. I live for Friday nights.
Let loose a little bit, all right? A little bit. Let that, let that go. All that stress from the week,
totally.
Right? That Friday night.
A lot of loud music, a lot of, just dancing and having fun, and just,
We'll alert the neighbors. It's okay. We'll tell them it's okay. Nothing bad's going on over there. You're listening to the Ion Life podcast. Like us, share us, follow us. We're talking to Rebecca Corbin, founder and CEO of Corbin Advisors. And we're going to start to wrap up here, but I do want to ask you just a few more questions before I let you go. And one of the things that, we've talked about is that everybody has a different personality. And you talked about, the people in any office environment, you don't know what's happening in their head.
Yeah.
Based on what's happened maybe 30 years ago or what happened 30 minutes ago. You just don't know. But you mentioned that, there's some personal things that have happened to you. You've lost some people that you're close with, and it's impacted you, and you've shared that. And I think that's great. I think it's great to be transparent, especially as the leader of the organization. So maybe if one day you come in and you're not necessarily smiling and as perky as maybe, another day, and it's just not just for you, for anyone, right?
Yeah.
People, they'll know what's wrong. She's fine, he's fine, right? Whatever. But there are boundaries. Okay, we all have some funny stories, I'm sure, about boundaries being crossed. And I'm not talking about like boundaries of like, sexual harassment and things of that nature. I'm not diminished. That's obviously extremely important. But I just mean just like too much information. I didn't need to hear that.
Yeah.
So what are the boundaries? I mean, you can go in and you can say, how's your weekend? Oh, great. My kid hit a home run in baseball, or, oh, I went to this new restaurant. That's all fine. I've personally always been very buttoned up at work. I don't like to share a lot of my personal life. I'm not hiding anything. It's not that I'm antisocial. I do like to, collaborate with the team, and I do like to, have a little bit of a social. But I'm also very careful, because you have to be
careful.
So what, in your opinion, what are the boundaries? And maybe even if you have an example of, maybe not now, but like in the past, where you're like, again, nothing like horrible, but somebody's like, they told you something, they did something, and you're like, I didn't need to hear that. It's a little bit too far. Nothing offensive, nothing, political, just something like TMI, right? A little too much information. What's the boundary?
It's really interesting. I'm not sure if I actually have an example of that. I don't, I think leadership sets the, kind of tone and kind of transparency level. So, I try to keep it on the up and up, and kind of of discussion. We'll get into weekends, but as a team or a group, we do have fun. We talk about what's going on, on our happy hours. You have to be real, but, if there is a situation where it was TMI, I think that's just, direct feedback to that particular person, not making them feel bad because they may not have, understood, the perception or the perspective of somebody else. So I think it's just feedbacking that. And, making sure that you're setting the culture where, you're not telling off-color jokes. You're very respectful of everybody. We have a very diverse team, et cetera. And, just making sure that there's nothing offensive or kind of off mark that's being communicated.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the thing I find so odd, and this was really interesting because I read this recently too, you may have as well, and we won't go into necessarily all the specifics, but we know the CEO and founder of Papa John's had himself into some hot water with some racial items, right? And again, I guess he went through some sensitivity training, if that's what you call it. I don't really know. I've never gone through sensitivity training. I've never been forced to, so I guess that means I haven't said anything off color that badly, I guess. But there was one particular, again, I won't go into it, but there was one particular word that he used, obviously very offensive towards a certain group of people, that was just ingrained in his vocabulary. And he said it took him like 3 weeks to get that word out of his vocabulary, which I found fascinating and disturbing at the same time, because we all have our, we all have our separate, we all have our boundaries, right? Of what's offensive and what's not offensive. What's offensive to one might not be offensive to someone else. And then there are some things that I think, like in that situation, I think that was probably universally offensive, right? I think that's fairly obvious. But I always find it interesting because somebody might, and we've all heard it. We've heard people say things, and I've actually heard things before where somebody says it and they don't mean anything by it, and it is pretty offensive, right? They've said something, and then I've also heard some people say something, and then somebody gets offended. I'm like, what did that person say that offended you? I don't see it. I don't see it through any lens. So it's just interesting when you do have a lot of people under one roof.
Yeah.
And especially now with COVID, where you're Zooming, right, and you can't see the expression on their face, or maybe what led up to a comment or something like that. It makes it even more challenging. But it sounds like you're managing that.
We're in a very embracing culture. So we're, again, very diverse, and people are comfortable in their diversity, by the way, on my team. So we do talk about that. Actually, when the Black Lives Matter was happening in February and March, we had a team call and we talked about just like what's happening and how are people feeling. So I'm a person that really respects communication and open communication and engagement, and any type, like, we've never had this experience, but if there was any type of racial slur, sexual, that's like zero tolerance for our culture. Right. It's just like no way. And then if somebody, I always look at intent. Was somebody, had malintent, was it just like, they weren't thinking, and it was hurtful. And, you have to be thoughtful of everybody's feelings, and, and you just got to work through those things. You got to communicate, you got to work through it, and you got to, get to the solution on the other side.
So we talked about entrepreneurship before. I would love to create something legally, obviously you'd have to do this legally, some sort of filter for humans. Maybe there is one that I'm not thinking of, but whether it's on the computer or whether it's in real life or social media, something that, because not everyone has a filter.
No, this is true.
Professionally and socially. Some of the things that come out of people's mouths, you're like, what did he or she just say? Did they just say that? And you think about it, you're like, did you really not think that through before you said it? So maybe you and I can collaborate on it. It's just,
as a society, we may want to have, kind of feedback, but it's challenging, right?
It is challenging, again, because everybody has a different lens.
Yeah.
It's not always right. It's not always wrong. It's just different, and that can sometimes impact the workforce. Before I let you go here, we just finished up Women's History Month, and we had a couple of shows that dove. We talked a little bit in depth about some of the issues that women have faced in the workforce. That obviously wasn't the full foundation of this particular segment here with you. That could be a whole separate show. I'd love to have you on to talk about that another time. That'd be great.
I have a different experience, I think, because I feel that being a woman has been very empowering in the industry in which I work. And, the women before me who, broke down the barriers and glass ceiling, I've never felt stifled or that I couldn't do anything that anybody else could do. Well, and actually that is an advantage being a woman. Well,
that is good. And I, as I said before, in many in some of these past shows, I've had some amazing. I've had both sexes. I've had some good and bad. I certainly have some females that have been mentors to me, and I think that's great. But let me ask you this. So you did answer my question, which I appreciate, but I want to go a step further. You talk about some of these women that have broken down, some of the walls for you.
Mhm.
And in one of our last shows, we talked about, women helping women and how that's not always the case. And I'm wondering, you have obviously you have a role in this community, right? You're a leader in the community. You're fortunate enough to have a voice. And when I say you're fortunate, it's you've made that for yourself. It didn't just happen for you, but you have this voice and this influence, right? So what is, again, I don't want to ask a standard question, but as far as like your role in the path for the future of women in your industry and beyond, what's your responsibility? And that might not even be the great role. Let's say, forget responsibility. Let's say, what's your role in continuing to make sure that women are empowered in the work that they're doing?
I actually look at my role as empowering both men and women, because I think we have to understand that we are equal, but we're different. We're different, and fundamentally, and that's why we get along so well. And,
Right.
We've been together for, the beginning of time. And so, if we can, I'm always teaching, people how to interact with each other. I mean, my employees work for a female, right? So, I mean, and a lot of them comment that they really enjoy that. It's a different type of leadership, but my role is always inspiring people. I came from very little, and I worked really hard to get to where I am. I feel very fortunate, and I've taken, just different routes, right? Not being a great math student, now I'm in finance and Wall Street. And so, my role is just simply lending my story and my accomplishments and what I've done to other people to, hopefully allow them to see anything is possible. Anything is possible if you have passion, you put your mind to it. Passion is very important. I'm a very passionate person, and you got to find what you love and you'll be successful.
Now, this is really interesting because it sounds like you've been fortunate, and you said you felt empowered, but I'm sure you have conversations with females who don't feel that way, who felt like maybe they have started from behind, that things are not on equal scales from a job title to salary to all the gender equity issues that can come about. Right? Again, full show that we won't get too much into that. But what kind of conversation, if you haven't experienced it, what kind of conversation are you having with maybe other female, and they might still be leaders, it just might have been a harder road for them. What kind of conversation are you having with them to kind of make sure that you're on the same page, or maybe you don't have to be on the same page, but how does that conversation go over a glass of wine on a Friday after work?
It's interesting. I may just surround myself with successful women, but I think there's a lot of different things that define women, right? And so me as a businesswoman defines me, but I have friends who are stay-at-home moms, and that defines them, and they're very successful. There's like the grass is always greener, right? Sometimes I really miss the opportunity to be a full-time mom to my children. It's a compromise that I have made, and I'm comfortable with that. But I would say that I don't know. I'm not a huge male female kind of, I know that there are issues. I work with our clients to try to, help them understand diversity and inclusion. And, they have such a bigger impact because they're employing hundreds of thousands of, employees around the world. But, again, I think my mentality is more male, female positivity. It's we're all human beings, and if we're positive and we're sensitive and we're also caring and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and I just always say, kind of light is an amazing thing, and you can really have an impact on somebody just by being the person that you want to be in this world, and continuous improvement. My whole entire philosophy is around how much positive energy can I put out into a day versus the negative energy that I can put out in a day. And sometimes it's a great day because I'm just like, it's positive. I'm giving, a lot of positive energy. And then there are times where, I have a negative energy, negative situation, whatever it is, right? Because we're not perfect, but that's generally how I think about it. I know you want to go kind of the female, but I deal in energy.
That's great. And energy, it doesn't, again, it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever.
Yeah.
they're all different terms now, but
Yes.
and I just want to say one thing. Being the CEO of a home, right, managing the kids and all that,
Yeah.
I know is one of the toughest jobs out there. So those friends of yours who are doing that, I give them a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
as you know, being a parent is one of the hardest jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do want to just comment, Brian, I am pro-woman, so don't get me wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no. Well, I don't think that, but I think you raise a good point there, because I think anybody who would think otherwise, right? Just because you feel empowered as a woman doesn't mean that you're not pro-woman. I think it's just, I interpret it as just the opposite. I've
had a lot of bosses. All of my bosses have been men, and they were very helpful in helping me achieve my career. And actually, the only negative situation I had was the first mentor that I asked to be my mentor was a woman, and she turned me down. And it was actually that, and I was like 21 years old, beginning in my career. And it had such a profound impact on me that, I am a mentor to a lot of people, including women. But just that mentorship, I always try to take whatever gifts I've been given to give back to others.
That's really interesting, because have you ever, and we don't know that actually, everybody's doing selfies now, but have you ever been like on vacation with your family, like a long time ago, and you say to someone, "Excuse me, would you mind taking a picture of my family?" And in my entire life, I don't know how many times I've done it, but every single time somebody has said, they've always said yes. There was one guy when I was down in Washington, D.C. once who hesitated. I was like, "Is this going to be the first no?" But to the point, I can't imagine. I understand everybody has a different personality. It might not be their thing, right? But if somebody asked me to be a mentor, I'd be so flattered. And even if it wasn't something that I necessarily felt comfortable doing, I would go and I would Google it and find out how to be a mentor, because so I find that odd. I just find that again, it's completely different comparison there. But
I'll one up you. When I see a family taking a picture, I actually offer to take their picture.
Exactly. I've done the same thing before. I'm like, you see a nice couple, they're trying to take a selfie. It's kind of a hard selfie. Hey, you want to, I mean, it's tough now because like, no, get your COVID hands off me. But
exactly.
But it is interesting. So I find that interesting. And that somebody did not want to help you. But again, I guess that's an issue. And again, that's not just I want to be very clear. I asked you that from a female perspective, but that's not just females. There are plenty of men that don't want to help men. There are plenty of women that don't want to help men that don't want to help women. It's across the board. But there are also plenty of people out there that do want to mentor, that do want to support you, that do want to see you succeed, and don't always look for the credit or the fact that it's a reflection on them. So there are some very good people out there as well. And if somebody refuses to be a mentor, I'm sorry. I'm not saying they're a bad person, but come on. Be a mentor.
It had a positive impact on me, even though it was a negative situation, because it just changed how I thought about things and made me want to make sure that never happened to somebody else.
Well, if they could see you now, right? They'd be they wish they could have mentored you, I'm sure. But so let me ask you a final question. Where can people find out more about you? Where can people find out more about Corbin Advisors? Anybody that wants to engage your work, you do phenomenal work.
Thank you.
You do a ton of it, even though you do have the work-life balance, which I didn't really even get to that much. We talked about it a little bit.
Integrated work-life.
Integrated work-life balance. I like that. But where can people find more information about you and
CorbinAdvisors.com, and of course on LinkedIn, Rebecca Corbin.
Boy, that's really challenging. If they can't find you, then they don't deserve the services. Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Ion Life podcast here. I know we've talked about this for a while. I would love to have you on again at some point, because there's a lot that I still want to cover with you.
Sure.
And I did actually, just for everyone who might have missed the beginning of the show, if you didn't hear, I'm off the hook now because I'm hanging up before you can ask me anything. So I'm doing that. We don't have enough time for it, but we can talk offline if you have any other questions.
One question.
Oh boy.
Where are you going to go on vacation when we're back to normal?
Where am I going on vacation? That's a good question.
You're not dreaming about it, waiting for the day?
Yeah, I'll be totally honest with you. My family's up in Saratoga Springs, New York. So if you can call that thing a vacation, you're probably talking about like an away vacation.
I love Saratoga.
Right, but I love Saratoga Springs. My kids want to see their grandparents. So it might not be so much of a vacation, but it'll be like more of a weekend getaway probably. But that's the first. I'm driving. I don't feel like getting on a plane just yet, but if I have to, I will for business, but not really.
Drive.
Beautiful drive. So where are you going? Where are you going for?
I would like to go somewhere tropical.
I agree. I will say this though, because you talked about being from Connecticut, and I just talked to somebody about this today. When it's 80 degrees in Connecticut, I don't feel the need to go anywhere.
No, it's beautiful in the summer.
It's beautiful in the summer.
Yeah.
for me, to me, vacation it's synonymous with warmth.
Yes.
So if I don't care where I am, if it's 80 degrees, I don't need to go anywhere else. If it's 30 degrees, I'm happy to go someplace that's 80 degrees and get the heck out of town.
Yeah, there is a concept around not having to cook, not having to clean as well.
There's
Having dinners.
Staycations are good too. But wherever you end up going tropical, travel safely. I'm sure we'll keep in touch. But again, I appreciate your time. Everybody, make sure you keep an eye on Rebecca, because she's definitely one to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on Corbin Advisors. Keep an eye on business. And as always, keep an eye on life. Until next time.